When people think of dog training, they often imagine adding things. But what if a possible breakthrough came not from adding, but rather from removing? So today we're going to dive deep into one of the most misunderstood concepts in dog training, which is isolation. Not isolation as a punishment or neglect, but as a concept. Something you can use with precision to reveal the truth behind a behavior, to sharpen communication, and to make progress that actually sticks. Isolation is how you cut through the fog of confusion, habits, and environmental dependencies. It's how you find out what the dog truly knows and what still needs work. It's not always comfortable, but it's very powerful. And when used at the right time in the right way, it can become one of the most valuable tools in your training toolbox. So let's break it down. In dog training, isolation is a technique rooted in precision. It's not just a stylistic choice, it's a strategic decision that allows for the cleanest, most honest confrontation between the dog and the behavior in question. Working on a behavior in isolation in dog training means to focus on a single specific behavior, target, or condition separated from other behaviors, targets, and conditions, or more generally speaking, distractions, so that it can be thought, reinforced, or modified with clarity and precision. This is the essence of technical training. By reducing complexity, we expose the real structure of the behavior, whether it's formed, fragile, or falsely reinforced by surrounding elements. Isolation forces the dog to confront the request in its rawest state. For the trainer, it becomes a test of communication. Are you being understood, or are you being guessed? For the dog, on the other hand, it's a moment of intellectual and emotional clarity. Do I really know this, or have I just been flowing with the current? It's in this tension that an important part of training happens. Now let's break down what we can actually isolate in dog training, because understanding the layers we can strip back is key to using this concept with precision. The first and most obvious element is behavior. This means selecting a single action, like sit, stay, down, recall, or lunging rather than barking, and removing any secondary movements or cues that might be riding along with it. So you're not asking for a sit after a down or a stay before a recall. You're isolating that one behavior and demanding that it stands on its own. Can the dog execute it cleanly, reliably, or maybe avoid it without a familiar pattern leading the way? That's the question isolation asks. The second thing we can isolate is the target. So the object, another animal, or a person the dog is interacting with. This is especially relevant in reactivity cases, nose work, bite work, or any task involving placement and discrimination. When we isolate the target, we remove competing options, decoys, or patterns that the dog might be using to cheat or guess. The dog must engage with only that specific target, without leaning on environmental memory. And finally, we can isolate the condition, meaning the context in which the behavior is expected, so this includes primarily locations and environmental distractions. A recall in a fenced yard is not the same as one in open space. By isolating the condition, we test whether the behavior exists independently of that specific context, or if it's just a product of it. So what makes this type of isolation unique is that unlike behavior or target isolation, it often ends up working against us. Dogs may perform well in the structural clarity of a training facility, only to fall apart when asked to do the same task in a different environment. Or a reactive dog that holds it together during structured exposure may unravel completely when spotting another dog near home or on a trail. This reveals just how dependent performances can be on the surrounding conditions, and why this kind of isolation, while difficult, is essential if we want to build truly resilient behavior. Isolation as a training tool isn't confined to one niche, it's a universal principle that can be applied across virtually every context of dog work. Whether you're addressing behavioral issues like reactivity or fine-tuning functional tasks like obedience, isolation provides the clarity needed to identify what's real and what's noise. In behavior modification, for example, isolating a trigger without the buffer of environmental management or distance work allows the trainer to see the raw emotional response. So, whether we're working on reducing unwanted emotional reactions or building precise, reliable obedience, isolation serves the same purpose: to strip away what's unnecessary and bring focus on what matters most. Now, let's look at how to actually apply isolation in practice, because isolation isn't a one-time event. It's part of a cyclical process that unfolds in three phases: isolate, generalize, isolate again. So whether you're dealing with a behavioral issue or building a functional skill, this structure allows you to first clarify, then expand, and finally refine. In behavioral issues, the first isolation phase is diagnostic. So we strip everything back again to reveal the raw behavior. We're not fixing anything, just studying the dog. For example, in reactivity, we isolate the trigger in a controlled way to see what the dog is actually reacting to, how strongly, and under what internal conditions. It gives us the bigger picture: where the reaction begins, what fuels it, and what kind of emotional or cognitive process is underneath. Then we move into generalization. Here the goal is to expand the dog's experience around the trigger. Multiple dogs, different environments, varying levels of intensity. And interestingly, many dogs do better here than they do during any isolation. The variety offers a kind of buffer. The dog can diffuse some of that internal pressure by bouncing between distractions. But the real test and the hardest part comes with isolation number 2. This is where we return to the singular trigger with all variables stripped away. There's nothing for the dog to lean on, no group energy, no blending in. He has to face the stimulus directly, calmly, with no help. This is where we reinforce self-regulation at the highest level. On the other hand, in functional work, the exact same pattern applies. Isolation number 1 is the teaching phase, so luring, free shaping, and capturing micro behaviors. We show the dog what we want in an environment of zero pressure and maximum clarity. Then comes generalization. The command gets named, the behavior gets placed inside routines, and we test the dog's ability to switch between tasks. This is where training becomes fluent and functional, but it's also where details can blur. That's why we need isolation number 2. Here we remove the context again, not to reteach but to refine. We are polishing. Is the heel drifting? Is the down losing speed? Is the recall snappy even when it stands alone? This final isolation phase isn't about rebuilding, it's about mastery. So in both cases, isolation isn't just a tool, it's a rhythm. It teaches, tests, and perfects. And once you learn how to cycle through it with intention, your training gains a new kind of depth. One built not just on progress, but on precision and clarity. So this is it for today, and as usual, if you enjoy this type of content, please make sure to subscribe so you don't miss future videos. I will see you in the next one.